Hello, everybody. Welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me here in my new sewing space. I'm so happy to have you along for today. So, you know that I am a sewing teacher in a high school. So, some of my students are making dress pants. Like it has to be a pant with a zipper. So, they could make jeans or a dress pant. But this is a pattern that I just love. So, Simplicity 9235 is such a good pattern. So what do? They discontinue it, right? Why did they do that? It's such a good pant pattern. And so I have only one copy of it left, and it's the size 16 to 24. And since I teach in a high school, most of my girls are quite petite. They need the sizes 6 to 14, not the 16 to 24. And I cannot order any more. And so what I have to do today is take this pattern and scale it down all the way down to a size 6. Now, if you've ever been in that situation where you find a pattern that you love, but it's not in the right size, I'm going to show you how to scale it up and down. And I've done this before. I'll link to that previous one in the description. So this one will be a pretty quick one to practice these skills on because there's only 6 pieces. There's the front, the back, 2 pocket pieces, which don't even need to be changed in size at all, and then 2 waistband pieces. So I'm going to take you through how I do that, and then I'm also going to show you how I put them onto hard paper so that my students can use them again and again, year after year. And then if there's time, if this video isn't getting too long, I might sew up a sample so that you can see how these pants come together, because it really is a beautiful pattern. So what you'll need to be able to do this is your pattern. And then if you want to put it onto a hard paper, this is manila paper, which is super expensive. Like I bought it with my school budget. It was $800 for a big giant roll, which weighs 88 pounds, which I can't even lift. I would have rather bought a quarter of that amount, but that's what I have. So if you could find manila paper that comes in sheets, maybe you don't have to buy 88 pounds of it. That would be good. Even poster board that you might have to tape together. Anyway, I'm using manila. So right after I mentioned how expensive this manila paper is, I checked on Amazon, and sure enough, you can buy a much smaller amount for much less money, which is exactly what I wanted. I didn't really want a massive giant roll. So this is a better deal, and I will put a link to that in the description. And then the tools that I'm going to use are a sharp tracing wheel. I can show you how to do this where you can get away without that, but honestly, it's going to be better with this. So I'll leave a link in the description to the sharp tracing wheel. I use a rotary cutter that I purposely designate for paper. If I have a dull blade, that'll be my paper rotary cutter for a while. So that works great for cutting it out. And then there are 3 rulers that I like to use. One is a metal meter stick or yardstick. The second is my see-through ruler, and of course my Variform hip curve. So there are links to all of those in the description. Probably not the meter stick because you can grab a meter stick anywhere. And then 2 more tools, an awl, which is just like a little sharp pointy thingy, and you can get away without this too. In fact, I don't even think I'll link to that because you can just use a pin or even a ballpoint pen sometimes, but I'm going to be using the awl. And then this is something fun. This is a notcher. It's a professional pattern notcher. That's kind of the best way to clip a notch, but I'll show you how to clip a notch without that as well. I've just ordered for my classroom one of those big hole punches that's going to cut a round hole in the pattern. If that arrives in time, I'll be able to show you how I'm going to punch holes in the finished pattern pieces and how to string them up so that I can be nice and organized in my pattern storage. I think that's everything. So if that sounds good to you, let's just get busy. So the first thing I did was photocopy the back of the envelope. Now, you know that I don't really trust these body measurements. I prefer to use the finished garment measurements that appear inside the pattern. But for my purposes right now, I just want to know the increments in between the sizes. That's all the information I'm after right now. So I photocopied the back, blew it up a little bit so I could see a little bit better and have a bit of space to work in. From 16 to 24, these are the sizes that I have, and they have a 2-inch increment in between the waist of all of those. And then going down into the 14 down to the 12, there's 2 inches from the 16 to the 14, and then down from the 14 to the 12, there's just 1.5 inches, 1.5 down to the 10, 7, and then just 1 down to the 8 and 1 down to the 6. So that's the difference in the waist size. And that's quite normal that in the bigger sizes, the increments between the sizes are bigger, and in the smaller sizes, it's a smaller increment. So there's less of a difference between a 6 and an 8 as there is between a 22 and a 24. And that's totally normal. So with those increments, then I can plot out how I'm going to be changing the sizes on this pattern. And I forgot to say you need a good pair of paper scissors. Okay, so to get started, this is the front of the pant. I want to look for any spots where things line up. Do you see what I mean? And I'm going to draw a line right through wherever things kind of line up. And even from corner to corner here, I'll draw a line through there. And these notches from point to point. And I'm just extending that. I'm kind of taking a guess as to how much my increments are going to come in. Those little corners of the crotch seam, they all line up too. So I'm going to draw a line right across where they all line up and extend it. These notches, I can either go like from the center of the notch. Maybe I'll do that. I'll line up the centers. And then all of these corners, this is the bottom of the leg. So there are my lines that are extending in all of the places where they fall into a line, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to be plotting out all of the sizes right from 14 down to 6. Up here at the waist, I know that from the 16 down to the 14, it's a 2-inch increment, but I have to divide that 2 inches by 4 because this is just a quarter of the pant. So that is 1/2 inch. So I have put a little mark at the 1/2 inch point. So that'll be the 14. And also from the 14 down to the 12, it's a 2-inch increment. So another 1/2 inch. Then it's just 1.5 inches from the 12 to the 10. So 1.5 inches divided by 4 is 3/8 of an inch. And then I get into just the 1-inch increments. And of course, divided by 4 is 1/4 of an inch. So I want 1/4 to get down to the 8 and another 1/4 to get down to the 6. So here are my 5 little marks. So 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8, quarter, quarter. And I'm going to make those same marks along my first line because I have to draw a straight line down to here. If this was a hip curve, I would do it slightly differently, which I can show you when we get to the back. Okay, so here I want again, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8, quarter, quarter. And then further down near the bottom of the leg, they start coming together. They're closer together and the increments are about the same. And so I've done here 1/4 inch, and then 3/16 and 3/16. So now I need to just start connecting those. So this angle is for a pocket. There's a nice angled pocket on this pant. And then it's a straight line down there. So that's where I want the meter stick to come in. Okay, so it's a straight line to here, but then it starts to bend, right? So that means I need to put my little increments in this area as well. So my first 2 decreases are the same amounts as the 2 above them. So when I'm down here in mid-leg where it starts to bend, I just need to figure out how much those ones are. So that's 3/8. So that's what I'll do. 3/8 and then another 3/8. Then I'll decrease slightly for the next increment. I will go a little shy of 3/8. So what is that? 5/16. And then a 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch. Good. I'm laying my ruler on the original line just to make sure it is straight. And it's starting to bend right there. So I'm connecting that line. Good. So now, can you see I've got my 5 lines coming down, and then I'll connect them to these little increments at the bottom, right to my red line that's coming in on the diagonal there, that's joining all those corners, because that's where all of these corners are going to be. Oh, I missed one. I messed something up there. Oh, dang it. Yeah, if your lines don't look totally kind of even, then it means you did something wrong, which I just did. I connected the wrong dot. So I'm glad I'm using my erasable friction pen. Okay, that looks better. Here's a bit of a fun part. When I look at these corner, these increments are all the same and they are just a little more than a 1/4 inch. So for me, for my smaller sizes, I think I will just go a 1/4 inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's where my corners are going to come for all of those. So then mid leg, I'm going to just check to see, I'll find it. Oh, here we go. Here's a spot where those 5 lines add up to 1/2 inch, and so I can duplicate that. So I'll put my new marks, each 1/8 of an inch apart there. Alrighty. So now here, this is a good spot where I can show you what I do if there is a curve, not a straight line. So I'm going to use my hip curve, and I'm going to find where this hip curve fits into the original line. So I'll just slide it up and down till it sort of mimics that line. If my ruler isn't going to take me to those set of dots very accurately, then I need another set of dots. So I think I'll put some right here along where my notches are going to be. And I think even in this area, I can still be 1/8 of an inch apart. Okay, good. Now I can find where my hip curve mimics that original line, and then I just slide it in to connect from this dot to that dot. And then again, next 2 sets of dots, connect, next 2, next, and final. Good, so you can see my lines there. That's all the inseam, getting it just a tiny bit smaller for each size. And then I want to see if this is straight or curved. It's got that little bit of a curve, so I'm finding where it fits the original line and then sliding in. And then just some dots a little lower down. And these ones, ooh, look at these. These are almost right on top of each other. Like it's getting to be kind of cuckoo here. So I'm just going to do a 1/16 of an inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That might be a little bit bigger than a 16th because my pen is just a little bit wider. No problem. 3. So now I just make a straight line that crosses both dots and comes down to my diagonal red line for the corners. Phew, okay, so see how closely those lines all converge there, yeah? Okay, so now the bottom edge is easy. I'm just finding where that line hits that diagonal, and I just need to connect there. And of course, not all smaller people are shorter either, so sometimes you might want to make sort of a customized measurement and not just follow what the original pattern did. You might want to change the lengths. Okay, so now here's one of those places where all the lines converge. Again, I want to find a place where that hip curve just fits in and then slide it up to my new dot. That's it. Alrighty, so that's the new crotch for all the different sizes. That's not even hard, right? Okay, it takes some math and it takes some patience, but not too bad. Okay, so some of the details now that we need to transfer over are these notches, right? And I'm going to now just make a little mark where my vertical lines are hitting that diagonal. So those are my new notches. This notch doesn't change, that notch doesn't change because it's all together. The pockets have a notch here, 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 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is a pleat. And you can see that size 24 has its own line, 20 and 22 share a line, 16 and 18 share a line, and then the same on this side of the pleat. But the pleat itself stays the same size. Like the space between the lines stays the same no matter what the size. So I'm just going to make 2 more lines, and I'm going to have the 12 and 14 share a line, and then I'll have the 6, 8, 10 share a line. And I'll use the same increments that is already here, which is what? About 3/8. Now, if you are comfortable with the metric system, that's going to probably be better for you. It's just easier to get really, really precise, I think, with the metric system, but that's a personal preference. So 3/8 there and 3/8. And you know what? When I do pleats, I don't extend those lines down. All I want is a notch here. That's it. So I'm not even going to draw those lines. I am just making those all notches. And I'll make a note to myself. This is the 12 to 14, and this is 6, 8, 10. So 6, 8, 10, and 12 to 14. Good. All right, my friends, you know what that means? This piece is done. I've done most of the back already. I did it while I was still in my classroom, but it's the same, like it has the curve on the hip. There's no pocket, obviously, on the back, so it has the whole regular hip curve. So how I did that was exactly the same as I did on the inseam of the back that I showed you. So I just find where that line fits my hip curve and then slide in the same increment. Right, so that's my new line for the size 14. So I just repeated that exactly the same, no problem. And same on the crotch. Hopefully you can see, yeah, you probably can see the pencil maybe even better than my red pen. Alrighty. And then the back dart, same thing. So I've got one dart for the size 24. The next one is for size 20, 22, 16 and 18 share one. And then I was just going to add 2 more. And the dart itself, the size of the dart isn't changing. So that is fine. You know what? This information here, the difference between the points, that's probably the easiest part to measure. It's 3/8 of an inch in between the points of the dart. So that means it's going to be 3/8 of an inch difference here as well. So the left leg of this dart, I want to move that over 3/8 of an inch. And then the right leg of this dart, I'll move that over 3/8 of an inch. And the points, I might as well put those points down here. So there's going to be for the 12 and 14 and for the 6, 8, 10. So yeah, the darts can be confusing because they overlap, right? So maybe I'll draw one in red and then I'll draw the next one in pencil so it's a little more clear and connect to that point. Good. So that means that this is the 12 to 14 and this is the 6, 8, 10. Good. And everything else I did on the back is exactly the same as I just showed you on the front. There's my notches. All good. Okay. The waistband pieces are easier. So you can see these two are 1/2 inch apart. And so that's the same increment that I'm using to go from the 14 to the 12 is the same. So 1/2 inch. I'm laying my 1/2 inch line on that line. So this is the 14. And then the increment gets a little smaller. So I'm doing 3/8, right? Because it's an 1.5 inch increment on that one. So that's the 12. And another 3/8 to get down to the 10. That's the 10. And then it's just 1/4 inch to the 8 and 1/4 inch to the 6. That's the 8 and the 6. So that's dead easy, right? And don't forget my notch. I'm going to put a line through all the points, and that's my new notch on all of those. Good. This is probably a good time to talk about what if you want to make it bigger. Well, it's the exact same process, right? So you'd have to decide how much bigger you want to make it. If you want to add, let's say you want to add 4 inches to the waist circumference of the size 24, you want to make yours 4 inches bigger, divide that by 4, because remember that's the whole waist and we're dealing with 1/4 of the waist. So you would just, instead of adding 4 inches in the whole circumference, you would add 1 inch on that 1/4 piece. So you would add your 1 inch, just continue these lines out. This can be your custom size, right? Good. Okay, the other waist piece, this is the back casing. Yeah, the front of this pant is flat and the back has elastic and there's a side zipper and it really comes together nicely. So this is the back waist casing. It's done full, but you only need to cut one. And so there's no reason why this couldn't just be done on the fold. Same idea. I'm making my same little increments off the end, 1/2 inch, and then 3/8, and 3/8, and 1/4, and 1/4. Good. And then my notches. That is it. And you can see the pockets don't change in size. Just double check though for the pocket. If you put it up against your smallest size, just make sure it's not crazy huge. And it's not, right? This is totally fine and normal. So that pocket, it does not need to be made into the different sizes. So that's it for changing the size. And if that's all you want to do is make your sizes, you're done. But what I want to show you now is how I kind of preserve this on the hard manila paper. So now I've got my pattern piece laying on top of a piece of manila. If I'm trying to preserve even the biggest size, I would actually tape this down and cut out the biggest size. When I get to this area where things are overlapping, right? The size is like, that's the small one. If I just cut off the biggest size, I would lose all of that. So in these areas that kind of overlap, then I just don't cut. I use the sharp tracing wheel and I just don't cut that area until I get it off, but I cut everything else. Once you cut right through the line and right through your tape, it just comes off again. I tape it down again for the next size and repeat and repeat and repeat for all the different sizes. But for my project today, I don't need all of these bigger sizes. I really only need the ones that I've drafted, the 14 down to the 6. So there's no point in me cutting all these individually. So I could still tape it down, but I think I'm going to try just marking everything with the sharp tracing wheel. So if you don't have a sharp tracing wheel like that or a pointed tracing wheel, then that's exactly what you would do, would be to tape it all down and then cut on your line. And anywhere here that overlaps, just use a pin, make a line with a pin, that's all. But for me right now, I think I'll use that for everything. So just gonna start basically anywhere and just start marking that line. I'm starting with the 6 because that's the one that a student is waiting for. So I will mark the notches for the dart. So a little notch there and there. And I'm gonna just mark an X at the point of the dart. That's it. And then I'll mark the end of the grain line, both ends of the grain line, and maybe one in the middle because it's a real long one. That notch, my side seam here, and this notch. Basically the whole perimeter, all of the notches, the grain line, pleats and darts, all of those details. And I can feel where I've been and where I haven't been, so that's not hard. Good, I think I'm all the way around the other end of my grain line. Here's one last little tip that I almost forgot, and that is that if you iron your pattern first with no steam in your iron, it makes it not only flatter, but it gives it a little bit of static, and so it clings really nicely to your paper. I still put weights, and of course I would not iron over the friction pen lines. This is the one that I use the pencil on. I think I got everything, so I can take all of my weights off, and I highly doubt you can see that. Can you see the dots? Yeah, hopefully you can see those little dots. I can see them plain as day. So now I can finally use a Sharpie that you'll be able to see. And I'm just relining everything. I probably can just cut on that dotted line. Just so you can see, I'll draw it in the Sharpie. And now with my hip curve, I can make the peak of the dart a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to call this S9235, and this is the back, and this is size 6, cut 2. Okay. Okay, here's the fun part, the notcher. I went for decades without using one of these, and it's a special treat to have that. It just does that. There's your little notch. I don't know why I think that's so fun, but it's awesome. And I'll show you in a second what I did for all those years where I didn't have a notcher. If you don't have a notcher, you're going to snip both sides. Don't just cut in the middle. Flip that little thingy up and like that. There's your notch. And that's totally fine. It's just not as much fun. All right, and then the awl. The awl comes in handy for marking the point of the dart. So I'm trying not to stab myself. There we go. But if you don't have an awl, you can use a ballpoint pen, especially one that you don't love, but I do love this one. And you just stab that through. And again, totally fine, just not as much fun. So that is that for making the sizes. Hopefully that's clear to you. I'm going to get the other pieces cut out onto the hard paper, and then hopefully my hole puncher arrives before this video is finished. So I want to be able to hang these all up. So without that big hole puncher, I usually just fold up 2 or 3, maybe 3 inches of the bottom or top of the pattern piece. I just fold that pattern piece and then cut a triangle out of it, which gives you a diamond shape like that. And you can put a string through all of those. Okay, a string, or I'll show you the hooks that I use now. But this isn't as good. It really isn't. Like, you know, these are just fine. That's no problem. But this is not as good because after a long time of this hanging on a string or on a hook, first of all, it's too big for the hooks. It falls off the hooks, drives me crazy. The string is eventually going to cut into this, and it's eventually going to rip through. So that is why I'm super excited to finally get a proper hole punch, and I will show you that when it arrives. Because I use the exact same increments that they used here, so I know that the finished garment measurement of the hip is going to be what it says here, which is 40.5 inches. And that's how I want my students to choose their size, based on the finished garment measurement. They can rapid tape measure around them to see what that feels like, and just to make sure that that's not going to be too small or too big. That, I think, is a better way than using the body measurements. That for that 40.5 inch hip, it's saying that your hip should be 32.5. That is 8 inches of ease, which is a crazy amount of ease to have on a size 6 person. So I don't really want them to use these measurements. I want them to use the finished garment measurements. So I'm going to include that here. So I'm going to call this finished garment measurements. And I explained to them what all this means. Hip is 40.5 inches. Good. The one last thing I do include for the pleat is an arrow, the direction of the fold. And for this style, it goes from the center toward the side. So I'm just going to draw my arrow like that and label that pleat. Good. So for straight pieces like this, I think I will tape it down because it's too small to work with if I've got weights on it. And then, because that's a perfectly straight line, I think I will just run the pointed tracing wheel right along my ruler. And this is also a good time to show you, my rotary cutter that's designated for paper on a good straight line like that. That works really nicely too. There we go. Okay. This is the center back. There's a little grain line on here. And then notches. And since that back waist casing is perfectly straight, I can just measure it. It's 3 3/4 inches, so I just drew lines 3 3/4 inches apart. So I can just mark my lengths for each of them, and that's going to be fast and efficient. So now's a good time to tell you that if you just want to take it down a few sizes, then you just have to do the math and add up the increments. You don't have to draw out each size, right? So if you are wanting to take it from the 16 down to a 6, so you would just add up all those increments. So we've got 2 inches plus 2, 4, 5.5, 6, and 7.5. 7.5 inches total. That's the total circumference. So you would do 1/4 of 7.5 on each panel, like on each front or each back. So you would just do the math and take off the full amount. You don't have to draw all the sizes. Okay, the waistbands are all done. So when I do want to use the biggest size, and in this case the only size, then I do just tape the whole thing down, and then I don't have to use the pointed tracing wheel at all. I just cut right on that line, and then my taped on paper just falls away. I will eventually be doing the size 8 and 10 in this. So I know I want multiples of this, so I'm going to staple a few layers of paper together here. So I definitely want all my staples outside of the lines of the pattern. And then I can get a twofer. Pause to snip those notches, just so it doesn't start slipping around too much. Both pocket pieces I can do like that. And then she is done. Just before I put out this video, my hole punch finally arrived. It's so heavy. It literally weighs 13 pounds. It's solid cast iron. Crazy. But anyway, look what it'll do for me. So I'm just piling up all my size 6 pieces. I'll do the small ones separately so I get that hole. This is the bottom of the pant leg. I'm putting those right in. Oof. I guess that's why it has to be heavy duty. Such a perfect hole. And then I've got a whole bunch of these hooks, and these are not too expensive, I don't think, but it's so nice. You just pop that through, and then you can hang the pattern up, and it just keeps it so nice and organized. So I'll put every size on its own hook, and hopefully that will stay organized. Isn't that nice? So I'll take this into my classroom. That's where it's going to live, and so are all these patterns. So first step is pleats. So the middle notch is going to go out toward the notch that is closer to the pocket. And this is the right side up. There's the middle notch. Pocket facing goes on. Double back for an understitch. Seam allowance comes out towards my left, toward the pocket facing, and I'm sewing 1 millimeter or 2 onto that pocket side. That understitch gives me a really nice edge here that now I can top stitch. Beautiful, both sides like that. My fabric doesn't really have a right and a wrong side, so I have to be careful that I am making a left and a right and not two that are the same. Fantastic, and now the pocket bag goes on now, and that would be right side together with the pocket facing, matching notches. So all the way around that curved edge from one corner to the second corner. Beautiful. Pleats and pockets are done. This is the back, and that's how I mark the dart. Just one little pick of the pin going across the point of the dart. This is the wrong side. So the 2 pins for the dart, mark my 2 wrong sides. Fold the dart in half to bring those 2 notches together. And then aim directly for a finger width above that pin. And then the last 2 stitches are right on the fold. And I do end with a tiny back tack. Good, so it's a long, skinny dart. Okay, and now it's the inseam. I'm going to put one front to one back, right side together, and sew the whole long inseam. I'll put a few pins in this seam, one at the top corner, one to bring notch to notch, one at the bottom corner, and then one about halfway in between the notch and the bottom corner. Both inseams are sewn, and so now we'll go to the serger. So first I'll serge the pocket. And then the inseam, and I like to serge with the front up so that I'll be able to look at this seam later and know which is front and back. Okay, at the iron, I'm going to press that pleat, not all the way down, but just near the top few inches. And pressing the edge of the pocket. And I can shoot a little bit of steam at the lower part of the pleat just to keep it soft. I'm going to give that serged edge of the pocket a bit of a press just to set the thread and flatten it out. And with that all sorted and looking beautiful, then I can throw a couple pins in just to tame these edges. Sometimes this bias edge gets a bit stretched, and you can put interfacing, a strip of interfacing down that bias edge. All right, and on the backs then, I need to press that dart toward the center back. So it's such a skinny little dart. And then I'm going to press the inseam toward the back. I can see the good side of my serging, so I know that's the front, which I already know anyway. And look, I have a clapper now. Two of my dear friends each sent me a different clapper. A big thank you to Susan and Kathleen, because now I have two clappers, and they're different. They're for different purposes, so I'm just thrilled. With that all sewn, serged, and pressed, now the two sides go right side together, and you sew the whole crotch seam. This big U shape goes together. I'll pin the matching points, so corner to corner, seam to seam, corner to corner. And there's a triple notch on the back seam and double notch on the front seam. This is going to get sewn, serged, and pressed to one side. Doesn't matter which side you press it to, but I'm going to do it with the nicer side of the serging facing up. Give me a little tug so I know it's fully opened out flat. I don't really press in the crotch area because it's just too hard to get into that curve. I'm going to be making a mess with all of that. So just the two straight sections. Now the back waistband, it doesn't get interfaced because it is creating an elastic casing across the back. I've serged one edge of it, and I'm taking the opposite edge and pinning it right straight across the back edge. There's my dart, center back seam, dart. And then also straight across there. It doesn't get serged because it's going to be enclosed in the casing. I want to make sure my darts stay the way I pressed them, going toward that center back seam. Okay, straight across there. Good. We take that to the iron and press the seam allowance going up into the waistband. That waist casing now just folds down. I'm going to take my serged edge and cover over that line I just sewed. So it's just going to sit right like that. I'm going to make sure it looks nice on the inside. It's sitting nice. I'm going to pin it, but I'm going to pin it on the outside right in the ditch. So just work my way along, do some patient pinning. Okay, just like that. Now I'm going to be sewing. You can sew either in the ditch or up on the ridge. Doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. But you don't start right at the beginning. I need to leave this end open to be able to get the zipper in there. So they say to leave it open for about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. So I'm going to start sewing right here. And I think I'm going to sew in the ditch so that I've got room for a wider elastic in there. So when you stitch in the ditch like that, your stitching all but disappears. Can you see it right in there? So stitching in the ditch is really a nice technique. So I've got some 1¼ inch elastic, and I just kind of wrapped it around my back from side seam to side seam. I made a soak mark where it kind of just stretches comfortably across my back. Good, so I'm not gonna cut it there yet. I'll just put it on a safety pin, and I'm gonna start at the end that's more open. Doesn't really matter, but I'll just shuffle that across. There is an elastic guide, but you can just measure it on yourself as well. So on this end, I still need this all to be open for the zipper. So I will just attach that end there. And then I can cut. Good. So I'll just be doing like a strong back tag there and one on this end as well. I'll have the chance to try these on once before I close that off. So if I need to remove some elastic, I'll have one more chance to do it. This is the front waist, and it's still just pinned from where I kind of tamed all the edges with the pockets. And then I've got 2 waistbands for the front. They're both curved. I'm taking the one that I interfaced, putting it right sides together with the pant. There are notches here to line up. Okay, and then I'll just sew straight across there. And then while I'm at the machine, I'll take the second waistband, put it to the top of the first one, and sew straight across there. And you know what? Before I do all of that, I'm just going to serge the bottom edge of this one. I'll serge it first, just so it's a little less cumbersome at the serger. And then we take that to the iron and press the seam allowances both going up. Little tug and push those seam allowances both up. Check it from the outside and make sure everything is nice and flat, no little ridges. Okay, so now it's time to sew the right hand side. The left is what gets the zipper, and so I'm just going to be sewing front and back right side together along that right hand side, right from top to bottom. So at the waistband here, this just is lining up so nice. The top of the back is just going to snuggle right into the ditch there. And then that other piece of the waistband folds right over top. You can do this in 2 separate steps. Sew the lower part and then wrap this over, but it's pretty straightforward to just wrap that and then just continue your side seam. So pin the top and then pin the bottom and then pin in between. Gorgeous. So I'm going to sew that and then serge. And while I'm at the serger, I'm going to prepare the area for the zipper on the left hand side. So I'll be serging this edge down to below the notch and the front edge as well, down to below the notch, just so that's ready for the zipper. I want the zipper opening to be about like that long. My hand span is about 7 inches, and so if you have a larger difference between your waist and your hip, like if you have more of an hourglass figure, you might want your opening to be longer. I'll be using an extra long invisible zipper, and so it's really easy for you to customize that and make that opening just as long as you want. And if you don't have a serger, of course you would just zigzag your edges or do whatever seam finishing you prefer. When you fold that front waistband around the back, and if you get a nice tight little wrap around that top corner, when you pull it out, it just looks nice and smooth. Truth be told, I had to try a couple of times to get that like not standing up tall and to get that seam just really nicely matched. So that will do. And then I want to be able to push this seam allowance to the back. So I'm going to clip it up in here. just a little above that so I can bring it out. Good. And so this side is prepared for the zipper, but I want to be able to try it on before I do that. And with an invisible zipper, generally you sew the seam after the zipper goes in. So I'm going to leave a long opening for the zipper, much longer than I need, and I'll just sew from that point down just so I can try them on. So I'm sewing from the bottom of the pocket all the way to the bottom of the pant leg. Okay, so these are ready to be tried on. So I tried it on and it's pretty good, but I did take out a couple inches of elastic out of the back. Time for the invisible zipper to go in. So I've marked it at 7 inches. I'll sew this one side and then I'll mark where that seam is hitting the zipper so that I can match it up nicely to the other side. I've got a regular zipper foot in because I don't have an invisible one at home, but I've also moved my needle over to the left and I just want to make sure that my needle is hitting right in that groove without hitting the teeth. I did run the iron along here to flatten out the zipper tape, just to make it a little bit easier because you do have to uncoil the teeth of the zipper. And then zip it up. And then here I just want to mark where that seam hits the zipper. And this one too. Good. That's it. Then I can open the zipper and bring that side all the way over. I've made sure I haven't flipped or twisted the zipper. It's just going right like that, matching up my marks to the seams of the waistband. Actually, there is no seam at the top, so this is the only one that really matters. And because I always want the edge on my right when I'm sewing, I'm starting at that lower mark that I had placed originally and coming up. I wanted to end my stitch right at that mark as well. Good. Okay, so now when I zip it up, it should just look like a seam. That's pretty good, pretty good. I'm seeing a little bit more of the zipper than I would necessarily like. I might go back in there and see if I can get in just a little closer. Not too bad. I'll just get that one part right here. Oh yeah, and there you can see where I wobbled a bit. I can easily just fix that. Okay, so that'll do nicely. I'm happy with that. Pretty good. All right, there's just a few things left to do to finish this off. So let's work from the top down. I need to finish this top of the waistband off. So I want it to more or less wrap around like that. That waistband is just going to fold back down on itself. I want the top of the zipper to be right at the top of the waistband, and then I'll fold that waistband down over it. I can feel the zipper tape and I'll just sew in the middle of the zipper tape. And you see the little end of my zipper is coming out there, so it's nice and clean now. Beautiful. So same on this one. I'll just let that come out, pull that zipper in, and fold my waistband down right along that seam. This is the front waistband, so it does have a seam there. And again, I can feel the tape and sew right in the middle of it. That's the front waistband. So when I pop that out, nice and clean. Good. I might trim off some of the bulk in here like that, just to make my corner a little flatter. Good. Oh, that does feel better. Okay. Now the rest of that waistband needs to be sewn down. Good. So here I'm working on the outside now of the front waistband. And I want to fold it so you don't see that facing part coming out. And pin in the ditch. The serged edge is covering all that seam of the waistband. So make it nice on the inside, nice on the top edge, and then pin in the ditch. That facing rolls just a hair to the inside so that you don't see it on the outside. And I'll stitch in the ditch. I just wobbled up onto the ridge, just a little smidgen there. I'll have to see if it shows or if it's going to bother me. Oh, right. Can you see that? I don't like that. So yeah, I'm going to take out those few stitches. So this is quite a nice linen that I have in my stash. I don't remember at all where I got it or where it came from, but I did a burn test and was happy to see that it is 100% natural fibers, and I do believe that it's linen. So it's wrinkly, but that look has been in for at least a season or two, so I think I'm going to be okay with it. And for this whole project, I've used a universal needle and just a regular straight stitch. Nothing special at all. I'll just replace that little section. There, that's better. So that last little bit of the back waistband needs to be finished as well. Okay, so the back waist is done. So now I can zip up the zipper. That's pretty good. And the bottom of the zipper, I'm just going to do a back tack straight across to secure that. And then cut off just below that. And then still making my way down. So I've got this gap in the side seam, right? Where I sewed most of it so I could try it on. But you sew beneath the zipper last. Okay, so now I want to connect right from that last stitch of the zipper to my first stitch at the top of that side seam. I can push this zipper out of the way. Sometimes I use a regular zipper foot to get in there. Even if I've sewn the whole thing with an invisible zipper foot, the regular one helps to just finish that little bit off. And I've got it on the right so that I can get into here. And it's going to want to pucker on you on the back, so you have to make sure the back is laying nice and flat, which I don't know if it is. This might take a couple tries. Well, it doesn't look great on the inside. I'll see what it looks like on the outside. Oh, it looks good. In fact, I can't even really tell where my seam ends, but no puckers showing on the outside, so happy. And so now I can serge the rest of that seam, and I will serge it together. And I want the front up when I'm serging, so that's why I'm starting at the bottom. Okay, so it's only the hem left. For the hem, I'm going to use a blind hem stitch. For this thinner fabric, I'm going to move it to the right. The width button moves differently on the blind hem stitch, so it hitting plus doesn't increase the width. It moves the stitch more to the right, meaning that it takes up less fabric. You'll see what I mean. And I'm putting in my blind hem foot that's got that little divider. You can do a blind hem with a regular foot, but this does help guide you quite a bit. I've got the hem pressed up and the pins with the head of the pin at the top of the hem so that I can fold it back like that and still have access to the head of the pin. The fold goes right up against that little divider on the presser foot. And then after a few inches, I just want to check that it's catching, but not catching too much. That's about right. So that's what it looks like on the outside. You can see tiny, tiny picks, but I am totally okay with that. And once I press this flat to get rid of that crease, it'll be even less noticeable. Okay, so these are done. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you learned something. And if you did, you know what you got to do. You got to hit that subscribe button for me. It means so much to me. Thank you so much for being along right till the end. And until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.